drums roll out, let the trumpets call, while the people shout, strike up the band. Good evening and welcome to our first concert of the 72nd season of the St. Genevieve Municipal Band. What you just heard was the full version of Strike Up the Band. We usually play a shorter version at each concert, as our veterans probably know. Strike Up the Band was composed by George and Ira Gershwin for the 1927 musical Strike Up the Band, based on a book by George S. Kaufman. This musical has two different versions because the first was unsuccessful due to its satirical attitude on warfare and politics. It was revised and opened on Broadway in 1930 with a successful run of 191 performances. In the initial plot, an American cheese company gets the U.S. government to declare war on Switzerland in a bid to increase sales. It's kind of an odd reason for a war, but okay. Sorry, our next piece is Kentucky 1800, and I accidentally omitted it from my notes. So we're going to go ahead and play that for you. call, we have As Summer Was Just Beginning, which is dedicated to the late film actor James Dean by composer Larry Dane. James Dean experienced an incredibly bright and equally brief movie career. In just 16 months, he made 3 blockbuster films, East of Eden, Rebel Without a Cause, and Giant. Only the first had been released when Dean was killed in a car accident in 1955 at the age of 24. For 3 years after his death, Warner Brothers received more letters to him than any living actor. A bronze bust of Dean by artist Kenneth Kendall stands near Griffith Park Observatory in Los Angeles, California. There is a Greek inscription on the right shoulder from which the title of this composition is derived. Translated, the inscription reads, "As summer was just beginning," which is concerning the death of a young person. The composer writes, "The melody for the piece comes from a British folk song, 'The winter is past and the summer is here at last.'" This simple, bittersweet melody seemed appropriate for remembering James Dean. Please enjoy As Summer Was Just Beginning. polka written by Milton Deluge with words by Frank Loesser. It was recorded in 1950 by Perry Como and the Fontaine Sisters, Kay Starr, Russ Morgan and his orchestra, and Doris Day and the Mellowmen. This piece has also been recorded by Tennessee Ernie Ford, the Ames Brothers, Frankie Yankovic, Lynn Marie, Joey Miskulin, Bobby Vinton, The Wiggles, Lawrence Welk, Jimmy Sturr, and Myron Florin. The lyrics of this song are as follows. Hoop-de-doo, I hear a polka and my troubles are through. Hoop-de-doo, this kind of music is like heaven to me. Hoop-de-doo, it's got me higher than a kite. Hand me down my soup and fish. The use of the phrase soup and fish, meaning a man's formal dinner suit, is commonly thought to have originated with P.G. Wodehouse's Bertie Wooster's stories, but other sources believe the phrase is much older. Feel free to tap your toes and sing along to the endearing polka, Hoop-de-doo Polka. Hamilton, an American Musical, is a sung-through musical about the life of Alexander Hamilton by Lin-Manuel Miranda. It was inspired by the 2004 biography Alexander Hamilton by historian Ron Chernow. The musical made its debut at the Public Theater in New York in February 2015 and was transferred to Broadway in August 2015 at the Richard Rodgers Theater. In 2016, Hamilton received a record-setting 16 Tony nominations, winning 11, including Best Musical, and was also the recipient of the 2016 Grammy Award for Best Musical Theater Album and the 2016 Pulitzer Prize for Drama. The first U.S. national tour of the show began with performances in March 2017. A production of Hamilton will open in the UK in November this year, and a second U.S. tour is also set to begin performances early next year. On February 14th this past year, Miranda confirmed that a film adaptation based on the musical is in the works. The concept of a sung-through musical is not new. In fact, it dates back to Italian opera buffa of the early 1700s. Similar to the arias and recitatives of opera, Miranda tells the story of Hamilton through rap. He also gives each character a unique melodic motive that is repeated throughout the musical in various keys, tempos, and timbres, depending on the context. Tonight, the band will perform My Shot from the first act. During the scene, Hamilton bonds with three fellow revolutionaries, John Lawrence, Marquis de Lafayette, and Hercules Mulligan. Hamilton dazzles them with his rhetorical skills through this song, and they dream of fighting for freedom. The rap tonight will be performed by no other than Mr. John Mooney. So please enjoy My Shot, arranged by Michael Brown.
I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I'ma get a scholarship to King's College. I probably should brag, I'm amazed and astonished. The problem is I got a lot of brains but no polish. I gotta holler just to be heard with every word. I drop knowledge, I'm a diamond in the rough. A shiny piece of coal trying to reach my goal. My power of speech unimpeachable. Only 19 but my mind is older. These New York City streets get colder. I shoulder every burden, every disadvantage I have learned to manage. I don't have a gun to brandish. I walk these streets famished. The plan is to fan this spark into a flame. But dang, it's getting dark, so let me spell out my name. I am the A-L-E-X-A-N-D-E-R. We are meant to be a colony that runs independently. Meanwhile, Britain keeps spitting on us endlessly. Essentially, they tax us relentlessly. Then King George runs around and runs a spending spree. He ain't ever gonna set his descendants free, so there will be a revolution in this century. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. Everybody sing. Hey. Woo. Hey, let them hear you. Let's go. I said, shout it to the rooftop. Said to the rooftops. Come on, let's go. Rise up, when you're living on your knees, you rise up. Tell your brother that he's gotta rise up. Tell your sister that she's gotta rise up. When are these colonies gonna rise up? 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 Rise up. I'm past patiently waiting, I'm passionately smashing every expectation, every action's an act of creation. I'm laughing in the face of casualties and sorrow. For the first time I'm thinking past tomorrow, and I am not throwing away my shot. I am not throwing away my shot. Hey yo, I'm just like my country. I'm young, scrappy, and hungry, and I'm not throwing away my shot. We're gonna rise up, time to take a shot. We're gonna rise up, time to take a shot. It's time to take a shot. It's time to take a shot. It's time to take a shot. Take a shot, shot. Hey yo, it's time to take a shot. Time to take a shot. And I am not throwing away my shot.
Really quickly before this next piece, I would like to wish Gloria Means, our first clarinet person, a happy birthday. Everybody give her a round of applause. If this were college band, we would have somebody get up and conduct happy birthday for her, but we're not going to do that tonight. Up next, we've got Lincolnshire Posy, which is based on folk songs collected by Granger in Lincolnshire between 1905 and 1906. He intended it as a collection of musical wildflowers, reflective not only of the songs, but the singers who sang them. Granger hailed folk singers as the kings and queens of song, claiming that no other concert singer approached the rural warblers in a variety of tone quality, range of dynamics, rhythmic resourcefulness, and individuality of style. Thus, style, as you can figure out, plays an important role in each movement. Granger recorded each song on wax cylinders to faithfully transcribe the music for band. As a result of his studies, he composed Lincolnshire Posy in 1937. It was premiered in Milwaukee in 1937 by the Pabst Blue Ribbon Beer Factory Workers Band. This premiere was incomplete, as it will be this evening, because back then the Pabst band was not up to the challenge of the harder movements, which I can imagine if you're working in a beer factory and not a professional musician. Tonight we will be playing movements 1, 2, and 6. The first movement features 2 different folk songs. The first one, Lisbon Bay, also known as Sailor's Song, and the Duke of Marlborough. Lisbon Bay was collected from Mr. Dean of Hibblestone, Lincolnshire, England, at the Brig Union Workhouse. Mr. Dean was so emotional remembering the old song that the workhouse matron would actually not let him complete it during the initial recording. So Granger had to return a year later with the phonograph to record the rest of the song. The lyrics to this song concern a man named William who has been summoned to sail to battle in Lisbon, and his pregnant girlfriend Nancy, who threatens to disguise herself as a man and join the battle if he doesn't stay home. The Duke of Marlborough concerns the war stories of Marlborough under Queen Anne and Charles II. The tune itself is basically a metered version of Lord Melbourne, which is featured in the 5th movement of Lincolnshire Posy, which you will not hear this evening. Movement 2, Portstow Grange, was sung to Granger by George Goldthorpe. It tells a somewhat vague story of a local tragedy. Granger wrote in his manuscript, John Bolin was a foreman at the farm at Portstow, and John Steele I. Spann was wagoner under him. They fell out, and J.S. Spann made these verses. So basically, a friendship broke. The final movement, The Lost Lady Found, is a true dance song. Granger noted that it came down to us from the days when voices, rather than instruments, held village dancers together. Miss Lucy E. Broadwood collected this tune in 1893 and described the singer in great detail, saying, Mrs. Hill, an old family nurse and native of Lincolnshire, learned her delightful song when a child from an old cook who danced as she sang it, beating time on the store kitchen floor with her iron pattens. The cook was thus unconsciously carrying out the original intention of the ballad, signifying a song to dance measure accompanied by dancing. End quote. The lyrics concern a girl supposedly stolen away by gypsies. Her uncle is accused of murder and sentenced to death, but is saved by the girl's lover upon her rescue. I hope you enjoy these catchy movements of Lincolnshire Posy. concert. There's a time in each year that we always hold dear, good old summertime. With the birds and the trees and sweet scented breezes, good old summertime. When your day's work is over, then you are in clover, and life is one beautiful rhyme. No trouble annoying, each one is enjoying the good old summertime. In the Good Old Summertime is considered an American Tin Pan Alley song. It was first published in 1902 with music by George Evans and lyrics by Ren Shields. Tin Pan Alley is what we call the collection of New York City music publishers and songwriters of American popular music from about 1885 into the early 1900s. It actually referred to a specific place, West 28th Street between 5th and 6th Avenue in Manhattan, the home of a good number of music publishers. Some think the name refers to the sound of many pianos testing new music, comparing them to the banging of tin pans, but others claim it arose from physical modifications of the piano to produce more percussive sounds. Eventually, the term came to refer to the U.S. music industry in general. And the Good Old Summertime became extremely popular, and as a result, had many artists recording it, including John Philip Sousa's band in 1903. Many of you are also probably familiar with the Judy Garland film named after it. It was also featured in many television programs, including an early Mickey Mouse cartoon from 1930 called The Picnic, and an episode of Arthur on PBS titled Tipping the Scales, and in the 1930 Laurel and Hardy short called Below Zero, in which it is sung during a snowstorm, ironically. Feel free to sing along to In the Good Old Summertime, arranged by George F. Briegel. Arrangement of School's Out by Alice Cooper. This song was Alice Cooper's first major single, reaching number 7 on the Billboard Hot 100 Singles Chart. Billboard ranked it as number 75 song for 1972, but in Britain, the song went to number 1 on the UK Singles Chart that summer. The inspiration for the song came from answering the question, what's the greatest 3 minutes of your life? Cooper's response was, there's 2 times during the year. One is Christmas morning, when you're getting ready to open presents, and the next one is the last 3 minutes of the last day of school, when you're sitting there, and it's like a slow fuse burning. I said, if we can catch that 3 minutes in a song, it's going to be so big. As some of you may know, the lyrics indicate that not only is the school year ended for summer vacation, but ended forever, as in the school itself had been blown up. The original song even ends with the school bell sound that fades out. As you can imagine, teachers, parents, principals, counselors, and psychologists shunned this song and demanded several radio stations to ban the song from ever being played on the air. In fact, a few radio stations did ban it from their airwaves, stating that the song gave the students a negative impression of rebelliousness against childhood education. On a much happier note, the arrangement you're about to hear begins with the familiar graduation tune, Pop and Circumstance, and to set the stage, maybe of a few high school seniors' summer experience. Please enjoy this arrangement of School's Out. Up next, we have a march called The Trombone King, composed by low brass master Carl King. As you probably guessed, this piece features the trombones. Composer Carl King grew up as a self-taught musician with very little schooling of any kind. At 18, he began a career playing in and directing circus bands, including those of Barnum and Bailey, Robinson Famous Shows, the Sells Floto Circus, and Buffalo Bill's Wild West Show. King settled down in Fort Dodge, Iowa in 1920, and for the next 51 years conducted the city's municipal band. King published more than 300 works, gallops, waltzes, overtures, serenades, rags, and 188 marches and screamers. He seemed to like composing under pressure and often composed in tight spots, such as by oil lamp and cramped circus tents. I hope you enjoy The Trombone King. Leroy Anderson wrote the syncopated clock in 1945 while serving with the U.S. Army in Washington. Anderson had been invited as guest conductor to the Boston Pops Orchestra during their annual Harvard Night. Anderson wanted to introduce a new work and composed a song about a clock with a syncopated rhythm. The idea for the title reportedly occurred to him before he wrote the music. In a few hours, he wrote the music, scored it for orchestra, then mailed it to the Symphony Hall in Boston. Fiedler had the orchestra parts copied from the score. Then, with a 3-day pass, Anderson traveled from his home in Arlington, Virginia to Boston, where he conducted the premiere on May 28, 1945. When the syncopated clock was recorded in 1950, it was noticed by the producers of a new television program called The Late Show. The piece was chosen as the theme music for The Late Show, which helped publicize Anderson's music. The syncopated clock was used by the show for the next 25 years. It became a piece that many Americans could readily hum or whistle, even if few would have noticed the name of its composer. Please enjoy the syncopated clock. As our veteran listeners know, we always conclude our concert with a Sousa March. Washington Post was written by John Philip Sousa in 1889. Since then, it has remained as one of his most popular marches throughout the U.S. and many countries abroad. In 1889, owners of the Washington Post newspaper requested that Sousa, the leader of the United States Marine Corps Band, compose a march for the newspaper's essay contest award ceremony. Sousa obliged. The Washington Post March was introduced at the ceremony on June 15, 1889, and it became quite popular. It led to a British journalist dubbing Sousa the March King, which he's now commonly known as. Sousa is honored in the Washington Post building for his contribution to the newspaper and his country. I hope you enjoy the Sousa March, the Washington Post. Our first concert of the 2017 season, I'd like to thank all of you for coming out tonight to support and enjoy the St. Genevieve Municipal Band. Let's give them all a round of applause. I'd also like to thank any other individual or organization who has supported the Municipal Band in any way. Let's also give them a round of applause. If you enjoyed tonight's performance, be sure to let Mr. Mooney or any of the other players know what a good job they did, and be sure to come out next Thursday for the second concert of the season. Thank you all.